Welcome to the Transformative Neurotherapy Podcast with your host, Dr. Heather Putney, founder and executive director of Transformative Neurotherapy. This is the place where healing happens faster. Because let's face it, your brain doesn't come with an owner's manual until now. Here, we take a holistic approach to brain health, bringing together science, mind-body harmony, and the tools you need to optimize your well-being. Whether you're a high performer, executive, athlete, longevity hacker, or just someone tired of your brain working against you, Dr. Putney is here to help you unlock your full potential. From brain fog to chronic stress, we're covering it all so you can finally experience brain health, mind harmony, and total well-being. Ready to get unstuck? Let's get started.
From sensory overload to speech delays, discover how neurotherapy is helping children and adults thrive in ways traditional therapies often miss. Welcome, everyone. I'm Julie Schwenzer, co-host and producer in the studio with Dr. Heather Putney, founder and executive director of Transformative Neurotherapy. Dr. Heather, it's always great to be with you. Let's explore today's question. How does neurotherapy help with autism and developmental delays?
Great. We actually get quite a few clients that come into the clinic with this. I would say we definitely see some adults. The adults tend to be on what used to be called the Asperger's, thing. It's not classified like that anymore, but most people recognize that, kind of seemingly high functioning, but then feeling kind of stuck in some ways. So we get a decent amount of clients like that, but we also get a lot of kiddos that are really struggling in school, and a lot of the other supports just aren't working for them. And they'll come in and they may have a mix of things, autism and developmental delays. There can be a lot of overlap. So you may have autism and ADHD, autism and OCD, learning disabilities, and so forth. And so there tends to be a lot of comorbid conditions going on here with these types of conditions. And so we see quite a bit of that. But the fortunate thing is we are able to help them move forward. When it's developmental delays, however, it's a little bit longer road. So whereas some of the conditions that we treat, like depression and anxiety, those can actually move pretty quickly, with the neurotherapy, as far as that goes. But with developmental delays and autism, the brain tends to be running a little slower in certain areas. And so it needs to kind of be almost rehabilitated and kind of sped up to what would be, developmentally appropriate speeds. So sometimes these kiddos have had some sort of like hypoxic damage, maybe in a birth trauma where they lost oxygen. Sometimes it could be near drowning episodes or just, some accidents that happen. So a lack of oxygen can create some developmental delays in the brain. And so what we're doing is we're kind of like sending resources and like kind of helping the brain kind of catch up. And so what you'll see is like the kid might come in and they might be 8 or 10, but when we start stimulating some of the brain to try to catch up those regions that are slower than would be expected for their age, you may see them start, going through some certain developmental, stages, kind of like repeating things that they skipped. You might even see like a kid regress and start bedwetting again, but he's like going through the thing that won't last long, but there's some pieces where they're just kind of like going through some things. So you sometimes see some things go back before they go forward, but they're kind of like catching up. And it will be, when we're working with these conditions, I just want to be straightforward with, families that we will see, we do see healing and we do see movement, but it is not as quick. It will be more treatment than some of the other conditions. But let me explain like some of the examples, some of the changes that we've, seen with the kids. So when you've met someone with autism, you've met one person with autism. And so as far as like what symptoms we're treating, it depends on the behavioral characteristics or the struggles of that child. Some are very sensory, they're really struggling with a lot of sensory inputs, and that can cause them to overwhelm and so forth. And so we'll probably see some dysregulation along the sensory motor strip or the sensory integration centers, and we'll work there. Some tend to show more behavioral, maybe they can be a little aggressive or just a lot of overwhelm, impulsivity and so forth. So we'll be working in some different regions of the brain and whatnot. So we're targeting, we're targeting the symptoms. So the treatment's going to look at what we see in the brain, but also we're going to be targeting the symptoms that are most disturbing to the kids and the family. We work a lot. We might see kids with learning disabilities, dyslexia. So we'll work kind of in this area. We see kids like really struggling with reading and becoming strong readers. Like it's pretty impressive, some of the gains that they can make with just a little boost, So some of the examples of things that we'll see, one of the things that we see in the brain is a struggle to kind of perceive others in a certain way. So that like kind of that tuning in, we see a mu rhythm frequently. And about 70% of autistic clients will see a mu rhythm in the brain. And that's basically like a functional disconnect between the frontal lobe and, the temporal and parietal regions. And it kind of like makes people a little bit spacey, and they're not tuning in. So that there's a lot of like cues that people with autism can sometimes miss. When that mu rhythm is kicking on, it's creating a functional disengagement. So sometimes what we'll do is try to calm down that mu rhythm, and then they're able to kind of like see and perceive things a little differently than they had it before. I was working with one teenager, and the mom said, what was really cool after a little bit, they weren't looking for this thing in particular, but she just noticed that he was tuning into the family more, like noticing like when she was stressed out, or like he would like maybe help clear a dish, like notice that it needed to be done and do it, or like notice a sibling that was maybe struggling and maybe like help in a way that like he never would have thought to do before, and so it was just really neat. He still had all of his personalities. We're not changing the person, but his just ability to tune in increased, and that helped him socially. And that was one of the little victories that we had in that case.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's wonderful to hear that. And you mentioned some of the improvements that families have reported, like improvement in reading. And you said like him being able to tune in better and sensory perception. Are there any other improvements that a lot of families report after these treatments for kids or adults?
Yes, but I guess the point is that it really depends on what we're trying to target, because everybody comes in with their certain symptoms. I will say also that we also see a lot of GI issues with these kids, and there's actually some really great frequencies that we can put on the gut that can actually really help. So they get maybe diarrhea, constipation, or whatnot. So we'll actually work a lot more. We really try to work a lot with the brain gut axis, especially with this clientele. So we may put certain frequencies that are really good, for the gut, as well as frequencies on the brain to kind of like balance both at the same time, because we know serotonin is created in the gut and some other things, so we'll really work on trying to calm the symptoms going on. Sometimes there's an insula issue with the gut that communicates with the gut, and we see that up here, and that can also help with some symptoms as we're regulating that, if that's what's going on. So, but like I said, it's just it's tough to say generalities, because everybody presents just a little bit differently. And like I said, there's so much overlap in this developmental space, between autism, ADHD, OCD, whatever. So it's just it's kind of a mixed bag with what people come in with. So their journeys, each journey is unique, just like every brain's unique.
And how do you collaborate with other specialists like speech or occupational therapists? Because that must be a big part of this.
Yeah, it's really important, especially these kids that are more complex. And let's face it, we get a lot of the really complex kids because they've kind of failed everything else, So a lot of times they've got a lot of specialists they work with. So one of the first thing is when I first do the brain scan and I work on that report, I'm getting a list of who are you working with, and try to get a release of information so that I can, communicate with them. And then also we'll share the report findings. We'll invite them to the results session, so they can collaborate and we can kind of, team up. I was working with one childhood psychiatrist, and based on some of the things we saw going on, that we could tell that there's metabolic things going on with the kids. And we did a little consultation, and we got, from some of the things we're seeing, it was meeting some profiles with other kids that had like pans and pandas. And so we talked to the doctor. They ended up going and like looking into that and treating the kid for that. And it just revolutionized, his treatment. I mean, we were doing some neurotherapy that was helping him, but there was something else that still needed to go, and really kind of honing in and kind of seeing some signs and then asking the doctors to kind of follow up on that was really targeting that. That was the real source of the issue for the kid. And when that got targeted, he graduated neurotherapy and he was doing so much better. So we definitely want to collaborate with the other providers out there.
That was powerful, Dr. Heather. Thank you for sharing your expertise. And we'll see you next time on the Transformative Neurotherapy Podcast.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Transformative Neurotherapy Podcast with Dr. Heather Putney. Remember, your brain isn't supposed to hold you back. It's supposed to power you forward. So stop letting it crash your party and start letting it do its job. If you're ready to optimize brain health, sharpen your focus, and age like a fine wine, schedule your free consultation today at transformativeneurotherapy.org or call us at 412-204-7397. Because here, healing happens faster. See you next time.